Welcome back to the Leadership Growth Blueprint Podcast, the show for leaders, founders, and leadership experts who care less about tactics and more about how great leadership actually works here in the real world. On this podcast, we explore how leaders think under pressure, how coaches drive real change, and what it takes to build authority and trust at the executive level. Now, in today's conversation, we have the one and only Rob Nielsen, a leadership expert whose work is primarily focusing on inspiring, empowering, and challenging leaders to create and sustain high-performing cultures. Now, this is a thoughtful conversation about leadership, human behavior, and the realities of change at the top. Now, Rob, we'll go ahead and pass the mic over to you. How would you describe the work you do in leadership and executive development for someone hearing about it for the first time?
Yeah, thanks, Jordan. And I'm really excited to join you this morning. You kind of hit it right on the head from the outset as far as what our purpose is to inspire, empower, and challenge leaders. We look at it from the perspective of every conversation needs to start there so that people understand where we're coming from. We're about inspiring people so that they want to do something of significance. We're about empowering them with the tools, the competence, and then the confidence to go out and do something important. And then we feel it's important that we challenge them to actually take those newfound tools and go do something with them. And that's really important to us. And the way that we go about that is by using our values, which are character. How are we showing up? Who do we intend to be when we show up? Empathy, which could have been tucked under character, but we feel like it's so important, it needs to stand alone. It's the greatest amongst equals. So character, empathy, and those will lead to trust. And until or unless we get to that place where people trust us and they feel that we are trusting them, we can't get to the next value, which is ownership or the positive assumption of accountability. And hey, I'm going to get my stuff done and I'm going to do a little bit more even. And then lastly, we talk about learning because the world is changing so quickly. And if we're not keeping up with it, we're falling behind. And I would actually interject curiosity in there as well, which I think gets woven and amplifies all of those values of character, empathy, trust, ownership, and learning.
No, I absolutely love those values. And before we dive into each one a little bit more specifically, I kind of want to go back. Was there something that happened maybe in your upbringing, in college, or maybe even early on in your career where you said, I want to study performance psychology. I want to be a leader amongst leaders. Did anything happen? Or was it more so a gradual process?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say it's been a gradual process, but it's also a function of where I come from. Didn't have a lot of money growing up, single mom, and then she met a guy who was a rocket engineer, and he had a 3x5 card that he put on our refrigerator that is still there 50 some odd years later, and it says something to the effect of have the right person do the right thing the first time, every time. And he put a lot of premium on do the right thing. Even when it costs you personally, do it anyway, which influenced me ultimately going to the military academy, going to West Point. And interestingly, I was very successful in academics, in sports, in general when I was a kid. When I was very young, my dad passed away, which is why my mom remarried, but we didn't have anything. And I had to work really, really hard for everything. And so I just worked my tail off in academics, in sports, had this curiosity and this desire to achieve and this desire to be more, to be able to do more. And what was curious was after spending hours, hundreds of hours in being a better athlete, being a better student, people started to say, man, you're a natural. In fact, I can still remember the newspaper that was, the county newspaper. They had a headline, Nielsen, best athlete in the county my senior year in high school for all sports. And I was like, wow, I guess I've arrived. But then suddenly I go to West Point and I'm just one of everybody. Everybody's a valedictorian. Everybody's the captain of their team. Everybody's an All-American. And suddenly I froze. And I was like, oh man, I'm not as special as I thought I was. And the reality ended up being that I developed what's known as a fixed mindset. Now, a fixed mindset is where I believe either you were born with it or you weren't born with it, as opposed to having a growth mindset where it's like, which is what I had intuitively growing up, is like, man, I just got to work hard and I can be better. And suddenly I get to West Point and I just froze up and I was like, you know what? I don't want to try and compete with all these kids. I mean, these guys are obviously much better than I am, and I can't compete. So my class rank dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped until I graduated in bottom 10% of my class. Ended up going to flight school in the Army, and then came to the conclusion, hey, this is not serving me well. I need to go with what brought me to the dance, and I just need to start working my tail off again. And miraculously graduated in the top 2 in my flight class, ended up being an Aero Scout, which is, they take the top 5% in Army flight school to be scout pilots, and you're sneaking up behind the Russian tanks. Obviously, this dates me, but that's your job, is to go as low and as fast as you can down on the ground to sneak up behind the enemy. And ever since then, I've like embraced this notion that whatever you put effort into, you can be better. You may not be the best in the world, but you can be better by just continually putting effort in. Whether it was in the military or in business, I've just always been able to embrace that, and started the company in 2008, built around that premise of we can be better, I can be better, I can empower others to be better at whatever it is that they want to do. And it's just become an avocation that's tied into my vocation to always focus on how do we make things better? How do we make things more effective for people to learn and to achieve? And I'll pause at that.
Well, thank you so much for those insights. I feel like I can ramble on for a good hour and a half just based on what you told me right there. I recently read the book Mindset. Man, I forget. Carol, I believe, is the author's name.
Harold Dweck.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I recently read that book, and it is so interesting because I also played sports throughout my entire life growing up at a very elite level as well. Playing baseball, I did possess a growth mindset. But once I suffered from an injury and my ego was attached to my ability to play sports, I felt like I had an ego death, one might say, and I didn't know what to do with my life. I fell into a great, great depression. And through those, I don't know, years, I also developed a fixed mindset because I was like, I was only worthy if I played baseball. I didn't really try that hard in academia because I relied on my talent to get me to college. And obviously, when my talent was stripped away from me, so was my, I don't know, college opportunity, one might say. But I kind of did what you did. I took a massive step back and I said, how did I become great at baseball? Well, I worked my freaking tail off, and now over the past 5 years, that's what I've done. I don't want to say I'm the most successful person in the world, but I think I built something pretty nice for myself. So thank you for those insights right there. If you're listening, it doesn't matter what you've gone through or where you've been in life. Hard work is always the answer. So thank you for that, Rob. So when it
Absolutely.
comes,
I would just piggyback that
yeah.
with, our curriculum has always started with mindset. In fact, we would require in our leadership academy, we require our participants to read the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. We recently have partnered with one of her students, and actually, ironically, one of her former partners in promoting mindset, Eduardo Briseno, who just actually wrote a book about 2 years ago called The Performance Paradox, and where it takes that core theme of mindset and talks about how do you balance in life that performance zone where you're actually outdoing whatever it is that you're striving for, and where do you balance the time that it takes to continue learning and continue refining and we've actually incorporated that as a substitute because it actually gives a little bit more structure to the core concept of mindset, but absolutely foundational.
Is there a specific set of problems that they come to you with, but in actuality, there's like a root problem, and what they're coming to you with is more so like the surface level problems to their leadership capabilities?
That's also a great question. Early on, people would come to us when they were at a standstill. They were at a roadblock. Um, we've we can't move forward. We're not improving. Our performance is either suffering or it's at a standstill. And oftentimes, in fact, almost all the time, it was, our people aren't trying. Our people are, we've got to impose, and they would use these words. We have to impose accountability because people are just not leaning in and giving their best effort. And what it's difficult to tell people is, hey, if they're not giving their best effort, it's usually not because they don't want to. They don't feel safe in the environment. They don't feel trusted. They don't feel empowered. And if I'm working for somebody that makes all the decisions and exercises all of the control, why would I give my discretionary effort? And there's been a lot of studies about this in the workplace. Average workplace, people are only giving maybe 50 to 60% of what they've got in them. And if it's something that we enjoy, that we get fulfillment from, man, we've got so much effort that we could add to something. You take people that are hunters, up in Michigan or the upper Midwest. Hunting season comes in the fall, and they're willing to drive 6 hours up into the mountains or the woods someplace, sit up in a tree for hours, freezing and getting rained on. And whether they end up getting a deer or whatever it is or not, they love the experience. It's part of their existence. But yet they come back to work and it's beautiful air conditioned factory or facility or whatever it is with beautiful surroundings and furniture, and they're miserable. It's usually because of whatever the cultural dynamic is. They don't feel like what they're doing is either worthwhile or that they're being valued for the effort that they are putting in. And the solutions to those are very, very simple. Unfortunately, simple doesn't necessarily mean easy. Yeah, usually it's cultural performance and where they feel like the employees just aren't owning their share of the load and not getting it done.
You don't have to, thank you for that insight. You don't have to dive deep into a solution, but could you give us an overview, just an example, so the audience can possibly take something away from what you just elaborated on there? How to get
Sure.
the most out of your workforce?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we do is we have what we call a culture assessment that we've developed and continue to refine here over the last probably 8 years. Actually, it's been 25 years in the making, but when we do it, we measure four things. Everybody's done an engagement survey. I hate engagement surveys. They ask you 30, 40, 50 questions and they give you a bunch of data back and say, good luck, here's your invoice. I want to know just a few basic things about any team or any culture. I want to know how well do they communicate? How aligned are the things that they say they stand for? How aligned are they with the things they actually do? Are we talking out of both sides of our mouth? Are we saying one thing but doing something else? And as a result of those two, what level of trust exists at all levels, laterally, upwards, downwards? And then the lagging indicator, which is the result, how much ownership are the employees actually taking? Am I doing the bare minimum to keep my boss off my back? Just I want to do my fair share, but not anymore? Or are people willing to lean in and say, hey, Jordan, let me help you with that? Not my job, but you know what? I can see that you need a little help and I'm happy to give it. What's interesting is particularly when we measure those things and look at the trust, because trust is the destination. I've got to trust that you as my boss have my back, that my peers have my back, that I am trusting the people that are supporting me. So that's the destination. And I've had people say that, it's the beginning of the journey, it's the end of the journey, and it's the oxygen we breathe throughout the journey. And I've seen leaders, and I define leaders as, do they have good character? Are they competent to do what they're being asked to do? And are they able to connect with the people that are in their charge? And connection is combined with caring. Do I care about them? Do they feel cared about? And do we actually connect with each other? And I have leaders that we work with all the time that are wonderful human beings. They're incredibly competent in their roles and their jobs, but people don't trust them. And when we peel the onion back a little bit, what gets revealed is the breakdown is in communication. You get some leaders that it may take 10 words to communicate an important message, but when they start to speak, they take 10 minutes to make the point. And then people are scratching their heads. What was the important part in all that? Or where they don't provide clarity. They don't provide clarity around, hey, what is it that we're supposed to be doing? Why is that important? And what does success look like in your mind as the boss? And without those things, people they don't know what we're supposed to be doing. They're confused. And if we have one of those leaders that complicates it by just going on and on and on and on, at best, people will tune them out. At worst, people will resent them because in today's world, we are so distracted and so time pressed. It's like, why are you not showing any more respect for my time than to sit here and drone on for 15 minutes? And so communication, in my experience, our experience, is so critical to developing that trust because until or unless that trust thing is established, I feel safe being here. I feel safe offering my ideas, voicing my opinion, voicing my concerns, where I feel like I belong, where my expertise is appreciated, what I'm bringing to the table is valued. I'm not going to be willing to make myself vulnerable by popping my head up and saying, hey, I've got an idea, or I don't think that's a smart idea. Uh, and all of that is tied into how effectively the leaders are communicating.
For a leader right now who's listening, and they are one of those leaders that take 10 minutes to get the point across, and even at the end of 10 minutes, the employees, their staff are questioning, like, what the hell was that 10-minute meeting about? You know, what would you say to that leader to, I guess, be more concise or to regain trust in their staff?
Yeah. We have what we call the 5 C's of communication. The first thing is you've got to have clarity. And so I'll go through the list and then I'll come back to a couple of them. Clarity, be concise, be consistent, can't change like like the wind blows. Be continuous. Just because you tell somebody something once doesn't mean that they heard it or that they've assimilated all of it. You have to repeat the message over and over again. So clear, concise, consistent, continuous, and curious. And curious goes both ways. It's, hey, what's going on in your world? Because this is what we've got to accomplish together. Or curious from the perspective of, do I really think that the people are understanding what I'm saying? And I need to get some feedback so that I can hear them validate that they understand what we're doing, why it's important, and what success needs to look like. Going back up to that clarity piece, there's a couple of different levels around that. And I just mentioned, what needs to be done, why is it important, and what does success look like? That comes from the military and it's called leader's intent. And we do a lot of work with the fire service as well, and they incorporate the same communication principle. And it's invaluable because if I can boil things down to, did I tell them what needs to be done? Did I tell them why it's important? And then paint a clear picture of what success looks like. I don't have to stand around and watch them do it because they already know. And if I've told them why it's important, and particularly if it's aligned with our global purpose and values, they're going to own it in their heart. And now they're going to take that ownership and do everything they can to make sure that it meets that criteria of success. And if not, maybe more. So that clarity is so important. And part of that clarity piece also is whether as the individual, do I have clarity around what my purpose is, what's important to me, and what are my values? Because I always like to say this, we don't rise to the occasion, we default to who we are. And real leaders, they build self-awareness and they refine their purpose and their values over a lifetime so that they always live in our minds and on our lips. Because at the end of the day, in those moments that really matter, we're not going to rise to the occasion. We're not going to find something within ourselves that we haven't already built. So that clarity around purpose and values is also important individually. And then for all of us, a lot of the work that we do with organizations is, what do we stand for? Not just what do I need you to do, but what do we stand for? And when you get a company where everybody weighs in, and that culture assessment that we talked about is a great starting point for us, because one of the questions is, what are your personal values and what do you think the values of the company are or should be? And we create word clouds out of those, and it creates this huge dynamic discussion around what's important to all of us. Because if it's only important to me, the CEO or the fire chief or the military commander, the rank and file and the mid-level leaders, they're never going to own it. Hey, that's his stuff. You know what? What do I need to do so that you stay off my back? Whereas if we all talk about it, even if we disagree and we're passionate that I think the word should be accountability and you think that the word should be ownership, can we talk about how closely related they are? Or you think we should be focused on caring and you think we should be focused on compassion and I think we should be focused on empathy? Man, they're all goodness. They're all really close. And then when we look at what people already believe in and we build it into a word cloud, what always gets people and you can see them start to lean in is, you know what? I didn't realize that in this group of 30 or 300 or 3,000, the things that people believe in are pretty close to what I believe in and what I stand for. And it makes it a little bit easier. You can feel the entire group just kind of lean in towards each other a little bit more. So there, that clarity piece is absolutely critical. We've already talked about being concise, and then that idea of being consistent. Well, just make sure that whatever you're saying, whatever you're doing, whatever direction you're going, that they point back to and relate to that overarching purpose. That's the consistency piece. Is we can't say that we care about people and then we're going to do things that just take away from their livelihood or make their lives more difficult or more challenging. That's inconsistent. And then the continuous, people need to hear it repeatedly. And then by building in curiosity, our values are character, empathy, trust, ownership, and learning. Curiosity, you can weave through pretty much all of it. If I'm curious about what's going on with you and your life and what's important to you, you feel cared about. You feel that I do have empathy for you, and you're going to lean in and you're going to be like, that person cares about me. I'm going to give them a little bit of trust. Sometimes we'll get people, you talked about empathy. Well, that's too touchy-feely for me. I'm not comfortable with that word. That's okay. Be curious. I look at it, that's a gateway word. You get curious enough about people, and at some point, you're going to be hard pressed not to have some empathy or compassion for them. And it builds on the ownership piece as well, just because of all of the previous build up and admin. And when we talk about learning, if I'm not curious, it's going to be hard to learn. So all five of those really go in and work together to build that trust. And if you remember, I define trust as a combination of character, going to do the right thing, competence. Are you competent to do what it is I'm asking you to do? And are you creating connection with those people around you? Because none of us can go it alone.
Thank you so much for those five C's right there. I'm pretty sure the audience did as well, but I got a lot of value from that answer. Thank you, Rob.
Good.
Not a lot of leaders, at least in my world and the guests that I have on the show, talk about empathy. Can you please elaborate on why empathy is so important in any scale of organization?
The best quote that I think I've ever heard, and I wish I could tell you who it was, but I heard it somewhere and I didn't see it written. Empathy is the essence of our humanity. It's been established for thousands of years that we are not the strongest animal in the jungle. We're not the fastest. Our success as a species has always been our ability to connect with and collaborate with others. And through empathy, I mean, empathy, it's like the mirror neurons that are part of our biology, that where we start to behave alike, we sync our behaviors, our thinking, all comes from empathy, where I am not just, we look at listening and we're like, oh, effective listening is where I really understand all the words that other person is speaking. I think it's more than just understanding the words. It's empathetic listening, where I understand the words and the feeling behind the words. And I think that that's where the secret sauce that often gets overlooked is, what is that person going through? So that's my whole feeling on empathy. Again, empathy, curiosity, whatever you're more comfortable with, they all will guide you towards a place, because if you're truly curious, it's going to come across as empathy to the recipient. And it's when I feel like you care. I used to lead a large sales organization. I had over 100 salespeople, and I told them, I'm not going to measure you on how much you sold. I don't care how much you sold this week or this month. What I care about, how many relationships did you build? And so they would get scored every week on how many people did you go out and have coffee with, new people. And I don't care if it's the person that cuts your hair or your bartender or whoever it is. I want you to go out and have a cup of coffee with them or a cup of tea or whatever they prefer. And I want you to ask them, so how did you get into what you do? How did you get into this profession? And why did you pick this particular organization to work with? And what are you trying to accomplish? What are you like your ambitions in the future? Just ask questions, be curious, keep asking questions, because one of two things is going to happen. Either this person is going to be happy to talk for the whole 45 minutes or the hour and tell you all about themselves. And at the end of it, they're going to walk away and you're not going to have a prospect because they're completely self-absorbed. Or what's more likely to happen is at some point in the conversation, they're going to flip the script because you've demonstrated curiosity. They are leaning closer and closer to you because, wow, this person actually cares. And obviously, you do need to actually care. It can't just be, if it's superficial, they'll read through that pretty quickly as well. But if you genuinely are curious, at some point they will flip the script. And what I always tell them is that's the moment when the relationship dynamic has changed. You're no longer somebody potentially trying to sell them something. You're somebody that they have described, that they have decided this person actually is interested in me. I'm going to give them a little bit of trust. And they'll flip the script and they'll say, so Rob, how did you get into your business? And why did you pick the organization that you're with? And what do you see for the future of your industry or whatever it is? And tell me a little bit about what you do. The reason that you're meeting with people in the first place is you want to tell them about your product or your service and hopefully have them want to engage you. But until you've built that little modicum of trust, which has come from that curiosity, that little bit of empathy, you're pushing something on them. But when you've demonstrated that you actually care about what's important to them, and they say, tell me a little bit about what you do, it's going to be the same conversation. Well, I do these things and I offer these services, but now they're actively looking for a way to make them fit with their world. And I can tell you that joined this organization in Chicago originally, and they had been losing business gradually over the previous 5 years. They hadn't done anything wrong. They were a service company, financial services company, hadn't done anything wrong, but they were just kind of sleepy and falling asleep at the switch. We switched the script, didn't change any of the personnel. We almost doubled in the next 4 years. 3 years, I'm sorry, in the next 3 years. And before we ended up being acquired by a much, much larger organization. And it was all because they were curious and demonstrated that empathy.
That's a massive case study, and thank you for those insights. I want to say two things. Number one is in my early sales career, I hated the law of reciprocity. I'm like, I just want to sell them something. I don't care about them. I want to push my product down their face. And I realized that no one likes you, man. Like nobody likes a salesperson like that. Right? So
Right?
it took a long time to really understand that. Yes, you have something to sell to them, but at the end of the day, they're human too. Like build an actual relationship with that person. So the first thing I wanted to say was the law of reciprocity in sales is magic. The second thing is when you are taking a genuine, curious mindset to another person, it's almost as if you're giving them value because you're giving them your time, your attention, your energy. And nowadays, we want to give value first before asking something from someone. And I think showing up curious and having that empathy mindset and really getting to know someone over lunch or over coffee is almost in a way giving them value up front. So thank you for that
Well,
story about that.
especially in a world where it's hard to get anybody's attention, where it's hard for, we feel like we're alone and nobody really listens because we're always looking at our mobile device. And so for you to make, in fact, one of the things we do in our programs is we tell people, we start the day. We start the academic day with, I want you to take your chair and physically turn it so that it's facing the person next to you. Don't just sit next to each other and turn your head. Physically face each other. And I want intentional eye contact. to the point where it's uncomfortable. And you're going to take 90 seconds, about, a little less than a minute apiece, and answer one question. Jordan, how are you doing today? Really? And then just shut up and listen to the response. And it's amazing. And people always think initially, oh my God, this is the corniest thing ever, until they've done it once. And this is a fire term. That word really is this accelerant that makes it so much more meaningful and so much deeper. And people come back months later and say, you know what, there was this new firefighter in the firehouse, and didn't really know the kid. He's a probationary firefighter. But I asked him, I said, hey, how are you doing today? Really? And I was engaged with this kid for like half an hour. There's something in there.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I do want to take one change of direction here, if you don't mind, Rob.
Please.
If you could teach every leader one principle that consistently creates meaningful change, what would it be?
It's a little bit convoluted, not convoluted, but there's a couple of elements to it. And it's a principle that we call trust, align, perform. And it's kind of like, if I can get clarity around my purpose and values, and I'm always looking for how they fit into those moments that matter to promote self-awareness, this principle is more for the team. And it's, when we talk about trust, align, and perform, trust, you got to start there. That's the foundation. And do people feel psychologically safe? If I make a comment, make a suggestion, raise my hand, ask a question, and am I going to be laughed at? Am I going to be ridiculed? Am I going to be ignored? Because that will lead to, do I feel like I belong here? And where I feel like I'm bringing value and I'm being appreciated for it. And when I get to that level, I get to a place of trust. And trust is where people actually are willing to be vulnerable and take chances. The best definition I ever heard for trust was, am I willing to take something that's important to me and make it vulnerable to your actions?
That's a great
So
definition. Wow.
whether it's my belongings, whether it's my family, whether it's my self-esteem, if I'm willing to make them vulnerable to your actions, put them out there for you, and either you take them, you take advantage of them, you break them, you abuse them, then obviously there's no trust there. But so we got to establish that trust, and then we have to create the alignment. We've been kind of talking about all these pieces already. Then the alignment is, now that we all trust each other, we're all fired up, let's go do something important together. Well, what is that thing going to be? We need to have alignment around what is our overarching purpose? What are going to be our values that are going to guide how we act, how we interact with others, and how we make decisions? And are we being consistent? Are we doing those things when we're actually out in the wild and working with other organizations and things? Because when you have that foundation of trust and alignment, now you can put the structural piece of performance that everybody focuses on and ignores the pieces down here. Now we can really accelerate and amplify those. That's where those communication, the 5 C's of communication, fall in place, and where leaders' intent. What is it we're going to do? Why is it important? How does it fit with our purpose and values? And then ultimately, what does success look like? Success means we're going to, do $10 million of revenue this year, or we're going to do a sub 4-minute mile, or what does success look like? Because if all we say is, probably it's like going parents and kids. I expect you to do your best. What does that mean? What is my best? Hey, I expect you to get a 3.8 grade point average or above. Now I know what the target is. I know where the bar is at, and I can shoot to hit it or exceed it. But if it's ambiguous, you're probably not going to get what you're looking for.
It needs to be definitive and almost tangible in a way, in a sense, right?
Yeah.
With the I want to call it like a pyramid or a triangle. With those 3 that you just mentioned, is there one particular area that leaders resist approaching that one specific pillar the most?
I would say it's probably, I think my experience with leaders is they want to have trust. They want to trust their people. They want their people to trust them. Where I think that there is, and I don't even know that it's conscious resistance, it's creating the clarity. I told you about our leadership academy, 6-month leadership academy, session 1 is all about leading self. Who am I? How did I get to being who I am today? What do I intend to do? How do I intend to show up as a leader, as a teammate, what's important to me. And we make them sit down and do that first draft of their personal purpose and that first list of these are the values that I need to incorporate into my life to create the behaviors that'll help me pursue that purpose. And we let them, hey, that first draft, it can be a stream of consciousness. It can be 3 paragraphs long. You may have 15 or 20 values that you identify, but now be real intentional about winnowing those down to where it becomes mantra, like inspire, empower, and challenge. So something that will live on the tip of my tongue long after I retire. And those values of character, empathy, trust, ownership, and learning, that you can't forget them if you want to forget them. Taking the time and then doing that as an organization where you've got 10 or 30 or 300 people who you're also trying to weave in so that they have the same degree of buy-in and passion around the organizational purpose and values. That's the place where I find leaders are very uncomfortable, or it's like, where am I going to carve the to do that? Because it is time consuming. It's not going to be done in an hour. I've seen it done in a couple of days, the first draft of it that everybody can feel good about, but then it requires constant upkeep where you're getting together at every meeting once a week, 3 times a week. And you start every meeting with, hey, let's just quickly go around the table, or before the start of the shift, let's quickly go around the circle or around the team. Who did something that reflects on our values and that you're grateful for? And what's amazing is, and we start every meeting with this, it takes 5 minutes, 7 minutes for a group of 10 to go around the set table and say, you know what? I really appreciate Jordan because I was doing this project and I was struggling, and he took time out of his day to come over and just give me 10 minutes that got me reoriented and got me back on, was getting some momentum again. And you go around the table and it's expected that everybody has something. And even if that something is nothing more than, hey, I just really appreciate that everybody showed up and leaned in and worked hard on this shift or last night or whatever it is. But making it live, and through those little stories, you're giving vision to those values. Those are the behaviors that mean respect, or those are the behaviors that drive trust or demonstrate ownership or whatever the case may be. And constantly, because values without behaviors that you can observe might as well just be a poster and a slogan on the.
Right, right. I kind of want to dive into some case studies or to some previous experience that you had with clients. I know you gave the example of you worked with a sales organization, the financial service organization, and you came in there and you essentially doubled their sales in 3 years without changing any personnel at all. And eventually they were acquired, which is awesome for that business owner. Do you have any other examples that you would love to share with the audience on why what you do is so valuable and so important to organizations?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And those are, like, you can see, those are the things that give me energy, those are living my purpose. Going back to that same financial services organization, very sleepy, very conservative, a little bit stodgy. One day I sent out an email to the whole company and said, you ever feel like you had an idea that would make a difference or that would improve how we get things done, but you didn't share it because you didn't want to be ridiculed, you didn't want to be ignored or put down? I said, join me for lunch in the lunchroom on Thursday. I'll buy you a sandwich and it might just make all the difference. And we had about 125 people. And Thursday, I didn't know if anybody would show up, and I didn't give them any more context. I think there were 4 people that didn't show up. And I said, I've got this book on tape. This is probably 25 years ago now. And what I'm going to do is we're going to play a chapter. If you want to come in for lunch, we'll play a chapter every week and then we'll discuss it. And so they all showed up, and it was, the guy that wrote 7 Habits of Highly Successful People,
Stephen Covey?
Stephen Covey. And it was Finding Your Voice was the name of the book. We played a chapter, we discussed it. I buy him a $5 sandwich. We got about 3 chapters in, and people said, it would be great if I had the book, and then we could just spend the whole lunch hour talking about the chapter and we don't have to listen to it. I said, I'll make you a deal. Next week, when we come in, you bring your own sandwich and I'll spend the $5 and buy you the book. They did. And so now we just assigned the reading. Everybody read it on their own time. We talked about it. And then I said, how would any of you like to lead the discussion? I don't have to lead the discussion. So we started doing that. They got to a point after like 7 or 8 weeks. They said, Rob, what it would be like if you didn't even come to these and we just own it. And so from that point, the culture, the people took over. I didn't have to lead anymore. But we've got a company that we work with, multi-billion-dollar company. We started work with them 10 years ago. They were a couple of 100 million. They had low single-digit market share. Now they have double-digit market share. And the CEO, I interviewed him, and he said, when we first started working with you, we were a couple of $100 million corporation. Today, we're a multi-billion-dollar mom and pop shop where people take the time to know each other, support each other, and have each other's backs. And that has made all the difference.
Oh, I love that.
One last quick one, a very heavily blue collar machine shop company, precision tooling company. First time we met them, I remember it was the beginning of COVID, and we met with them, and the entire company was in this big not conference room, big auditorium, big ballroom, and we had about 100 people just staring here looking like, when is my time going to stop being wasted so I can get back to work? And when we would try to solicit comments and discussion, and it was about figuring out what their purpose and values were. And everything that came up was, you don't understand this company. It's toxic here. We don't get the best and the brightest. This place sucks. I don't like, this is just a paycheck to me. I don't know why you're expecting me to give more. I just met with them again, ironically, last week. And as the company filed into the training room, there was almost the only people that didn't come up and like give me a hug and greet me and say, hey, it's good to see you, were the people that were new hires because they've been growing like crazy. And ironically, so this is like a 5-year window that's transpired where they have consistently leaned into who are we? What do we stand for? How do we live our values? They do a leadership academy like every year and a half, to the point where like 3/4 of their employees have been through a leadership academy and established their own personal values, their own personal purpose, and then intersected it with the organizations. And the discussions that go on, it's like the people are like, we don't need leadership to tell us what to do. We already know what to do. We need to like just keep doing it and keep supporting each other. And there were just countless examples of, I love coming to work here. I have a crappy home life, or I live in a very difficult situation. But when I get here to work, this is family. These are the people that care about me and that I know I care about. And the reason I was with them last week, and this is the punchline, they had just done their a culture assessment, what we call a culture snapshot, like a quarterly 5-minute 5-question survey, and their results and the quality of their culture, the stress level of one of the things we measure, the stress level within the organization was the lowest of any entity we'd ever surveyed. The perceived well-being of the individuals was the highest we'd ever seen. And their overall culture score was like the highest we'd ever seen. And what I wasn't even anticipating was the CEO got up at the very beginning of the meeting and said, hey, I just wanted to share with everybody, we have already booked as many new contracts for this year as we had for all of last year. And we are just hitting our momentum. 2025 was a record year. 26 is going to be off the hook. And he's like, and it's all because of you people and the culture that you all have created. And it's like, it's the time and effort that everybody in this room has put into making sure that we're crystal clear around what we stand for and what are the individual behaviors. It's making a new pot of coffee when I take the last cup, or, hey, I'm not too good to like pick up the waste paper basket and go and dump it, even though it's not my job. Or, particularly in the fire service, it's like they always make the lowest ranking probationary firefighter do all of the crappy jobs. There's so many examples in the world where when the superstars lead the way, well, that's a whole different topic.
Absolutely no. When your leader can lead from the front and do the dirty work, one might say, that just for one shows his character, but it speaks volume as well. Like me being the best person on the team is willing to sweep the sheds. I mean, someone who's not as good as me can definitely do the dirty work as well, you know. And plus, I feel like that leader gains a newfound respect with his colleagues, with his staff, with his teammates, right? No, absolutely. And I'm not sure if the audience can see, but when you're discussing or elaborating on your case studies and the wins that your clients had, I was smiling ear to ear just because I'm a huge fan of results. I'm an extremely results driven person, and listening to those metrics just really got me excited. So thank you, Rob. Rob, I wish we had more time together. I truly do. I know I got a lot of value out of this conversation, and I know the audience did. Well, audience, thanks for tuning in. It was a pleasure as always, and we hope to see you on the next one.